There is a force inside you, not outside you, inside you, that has been working against you your entire life. Not laziness, not fear, not bad luck. Something far more precise than any of those. A program, installed before you had a voice in the matter, running beneath every decision you have ever made, beneath every plan that collapsed at the moment it should have succeeded, beneath every relationship that broke exactly when it was becoming real. You did not choose this program, but you have been living inside it every single day without knowing its name. Until now, there is a lie that has cost humanity more than any war, more than any economic collapse, more than any natural disaster in recorded history. It is not a lie told by governments or corporations, though they have certainly benefited from its persistence. It is a lie told quietly, privately, in the interior of the individual human mind, told so consistently, so automatically, and with such apparent authority that the person receiving it never once questions its source. The lie is this: that the force stopping you is outside of you, that the obstacle is the economy, the timing, the circumstances, the people around you, the luck you were not given, the opportunities that never arrived, the system that was built against you, that if only the external world would rearrange itself into a more cooperative configuration, you would finally be able to move. This belief is understandable, it is human, and it is catastrophically wrong, because the most powerful force stopping you from the life you are capable of living is not outside the boundary of your skin, it is inside it. It runs through the circuitry of your nervous system. It lives in the encoded memory of your cellular architecture. It operates from deep beneath the reach of your conscious intention, automatic, invisible, and extraordinarily effective. Psychologists call this self-sabotage. Neuroscientists call it a conditioned inhibitory response. The ancient traditions called it the shadow. The philosopher called it the false self. In this audiobook, we are going to call it what it actually is. A chain, invisible, weightless, impossible to touch with your hands, but real in every consequence it produces, real in every relationship it has quietly destroyed, real in every career it has stalled at the exact moment of breakthrough, real in every moment of joy it has cut short before it could become permanent. You did not choose this chain. No one does. It was constructed around you before you had the language to name what was happening, before your prefrontal cortex was developed enough to evaluate the process, before you had any framework with which to understand that a pattern was being installed in your deepest biological hardware. But understanding how it was built, understanding the precise architecture of the mechanism that has been limiting your existence, is the first step toward something that most people never achieve. Not managing the chain, not learning to live within its radius, breaking it entirely. There are two types of people who will listen to this audiobook. The first type will recognize themselves in the patterns described here, feel the discomfort of that recognition, and then, in one of the great ironies of human psychology, use that very discomfort as a reason to disengage, to stop listening, to reach for something that requires less of them. That response, when it comes, is not a character flaw. It is the chain demonstrating its own existence. The second type will feel that same discomfort and stay with it, will choose in that exact moment of resistance to keep listening, and in doing so will have already begun, without fully realizing it, the process of breaking free. Which type you are will be determined not by your intelligence, not by your circumstances, and not by your history. It will be determined by what you do in the next 55 minutes. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Chain You Cannot See. To understand self-sabotage at its root, you must first abandon the model you have been given for how human behavior actually works. The model most people operate under is simple, intuitive, and fundamentally incorrect. In this model, the human being is a rational agent, They assess their situation, they identify what they want, they form a plan, they execute the plan, and the results they experience are the direct consequence of the quality of their thinking and the consistency of their effort. Under this model, failure has a clean explanation. You did not think clearly enough, or plan carefully enough, or work hard enough. The solution is equally clean. Think more clearly, plan more carefully, work harder, apply more willpower, be more disciplined, want it more. If this model were correct, the phenomenon of self-sabotage would not exist, because what self-sabotage describes is something this model cannot accommodate. The intelligent, motivated, hard-working individual who consistently undermines their own best efforts at the exact moment they matter most. The person who studies for months and then cannot sleep the night before the critical exam. The entrepreneur who builds something extraordinary and then inexplicably destroys the key relationship that was driving its success. The person who finally achieves the thing they have wanted for years and then within weeks begins to dismantle it from the inside. These are not stories of insufficient effort or inadequate intelligence. They are stories of an invisible force operating beneath the rational mind's awareness. A force that the conscious self experiences as bad luck, as coincidence, as mysterious self-destruction, but that neuroscience now understands as a deeply embedded and highly sophisticated neurological program. The program was not installed by accident. It was built with extraordinary biological efficiency as a protection system. Here is the mechanism. The human nervous system has one overriding biological priority. It is not happiness, it is not success, it is not the fulfillment of your potential, the realization of your dreams, or the construction of a life that reflects your deepest values. The overriding priority of the nervous system is survival. Specifically, the avoidance of the experiences that the system has catalogued through direct experience as dangerous. In the early years of human development, particularly the first 7 years of life, before the conscious critical mind is fully operational, the nervous system is recording at maximum sensitivity. Every experience of rejection, humiliation, abandonment, failure, or threat is captured and filed not merely as a memory, but as a behavioral instruction, as a rule about what is safe and what is not, as a calibration of what the person can expect from the world and from themselves. These instructions become the architecture of the self, and here is the terrible efficiency of this system. Once an instruction is installed at sufficient emotional intensity, the nervous system will enforce it automatically, without consulting the conscious mind, in every future situation that bears even a faint resemblance to the original threat. The child who was humiliated in front of others for speaking up grows into the adult whose throat inexplicably tightens every time they are about to present in a meeting, not because the meeting is dangerous, but because the nervous system filed public expression under the category of threat decades ago and has been enforcing that classification ever since. The child who learned that love and approval were conditional on performance grows into the adult who unconsciously destroys their own achievements, not because they want to fail, but because success at the neurological level has been encoded as a dangerous and unstable state that invites the withdrawal of love. The child who absorbed the belief from the atmosphere of their household, from the financial stress of their parents, from the quiet but pervasive message that people like us do not get those kinds of things, grows into the adult who reaches a certain level of success and then, without conscious intention, begins making the exact decisions that will return them to the level of struggle their nervous system recognizes as home. This is not weakness. This is not a character flaw. This is not a lack of willpower or discipline or ambition. This is a chain forged in the earliest experiences of your life, maintained by the most powerful biological system in your body, and invisible to the conscious mind that has been trying, with great effort and genuine sincerity to break free of it for years. The invisible chain does not hold you down, it holds you back, precisely one step before the life you are capable of living. The first and most critical task is to see it, because a chain that is invisible cannot be broken. A chain that is named, located, and understood can be. Chapter 2. The Architecture of Self-Sabotage. Self-sabotage does not look the way most people imagine it. It does not announce itself. It does not appear as a dramatic act of obvious self-destruction that the person can clearly identify and trace back to its source. It is far more subtle than that, far more intelligent, far more skilled at disguising itself as reasonable behavior, as justified caution, as realistic assessment of one's limitations. Self-sabotage looks like procrastination on the project that actually matters while maintaining perfect productivity on everything that does not. It looks like starting the argument on the night before the important opportunity, creating just enough emotional disruption to provide a legitimate excuse for underperformance. It looks like the pattern of choosing, again and again, partners who confirm the deepest negative belief about your own worthiness, and calling it bad luck in love. It looks like being extraordinarily generous and available for everyone else's crises, while systematically neglecting the work that would move your own life forward. It looks like the sudden illness, the unexpected obligation, the unforeseen complication that arrives with suspicious reliability at the exact moment of significant forward movement. To understand why self-sabotage takes these particular forms, you need to understand the two systems that are constantly operating inside every human being, and the profound imbalance of power between them. The first system is the one you identify as yourself, the conscious mind. The part of you that sets goals, forms intentions, reads books, makes plans, and genuinely wants to change. This system is articulate, rational, forward-looking, and deeply committed to your growth. It is also extraordinarily weak compared to what is running beneath it. The second system is the subconscious, the vast, ancient, non-verbal biological intelligence that controls approximately 95% of your behavior, perception, and emotional response. This system does not think in language. It does not respond to logic or affirmation or willpower. It thinks in pattern, in memory, in sensation, in the chemical language of the nervous system, and it has one mandate that overrides every other consideration: maintain the familiar, not the good, not the desired, not the optimal, the familiar. The subconscious does not evaluate your life by any standard of happiness or fulfillment. It evaluates it by one criterion: does this match the internal model I was given in the earliest years of this person's life? Is this recognizable? Is this within the range of experience that this system has been calibrated to expect? When the answer is yes, when your life is running within the parameters of the familiar, even when the familiar is painful, limiting, or deeply unhappy, the subconscious releases no signal of alarm. The system is stable. The organism is, by its own definition, safe. When the answer is no, when circumstances begin to move outside the range of the familiar, when success arrives that exceeds the internal model's parameters, when love feels more secure than the template allows, when abundance approaches a level that the system has no reference for, the subconscious does something that feels, from the inside, completely irrational. It creates a crisis, not deliberately, not with malice, but with the blind mechanical efficiency of a thermostat returning a room to its set temperature. The subconscious fires an alarm, cortisol floods the system, anxiety rises without apparent cause. The mind begins generating problems, finding reasons to worry, reasons to doubt, reasons to pull back. Decisions that seemed clear become murky. The relationship that was working develops a sudden complication. The project that was ahead of schedule mysteriously stalls. The temperature is being returned to its set point. This is the thermostat theory of human psychology, and it is one of the most important ideas in understanding the invisible chain. Every person has a psychological set point for every dimension of their life, a level of success they subconsciously believe is appropriate for them, a level of love they believe they are entitled to receive, a level of happiness they believe is sustainable without something going wrong. These set points were not chosen by your conscious mind. They were installed by your earliest experiences, by the environment you grew up in, by the emotional climate of your household, by the beliefs you absorbed from the people who shaped your first understanding of the world. And whenever your life rises significantly above these set points, whenever success, love, abundance, or joy begins to exceed the parameters of your internal model, the thermostat activates and the chain pulls you back. You cannot rise permanently above the level your subconscious has accepted as your identity. Until you change the set point, you are only ever as free as the chain is long. The devastating sophistication of this mechanism is that it always provides plausible reasons. The sabotage never appears naked. It always arrives wearing the costume of logic, of caution, of self-protection. The business partnership falls apart, and there were legitimate reasons for it to fall apart. The relationship ends, and there were real problems in the relationship. The opportunity slips away, and circumstances genuinely conspired against it. The chain does not create problems out of nothing. It finds the real problems, amplifies them, and ensures they receive maximum attention at the precise moment when forward movement requires them to be minimized or resolved. This is why the rational mind cannot break the chain alone. You cannot logic your way out of a subconscious program. You cannot willpower your way past a biological alarm system. You cannot think yourself free of a mechanism that operates 3 floors beneath the level at which your thinking takes place. What you can do, and what the remaining chapters of this audiobook will show you how to do, is go down to the level at which the chain was built, find the mechanism that maintains it, and execute a deliberate and permanent rewrite. Chapter 3. The Childhood Blueprint. Every human being arrives in the world as an open system, not a blank slate. Neuroscience has made clear that temperament and certain predispositions are present from birth, but open in the sense that the most fundamental beliefs about what the world is, what it will provide, and what the self is worth, those beliefs are not installed at birth. They are constructed through experience, specifically through the experiences of the first 7 years of life, during which the brain operates predominantly in a slow-wave state that neuroscientists compare to a state of deep hypnotic receptivity. In this state, the child absorbs, not selectively, not critically, not with the capacity to evaluate whether what is being received is accurate or useful or kind. The child absorbs everything, every message, spoken and unspoken, every pattern of response they receive when they reach out for connection, every emotional climate they spend their early years breathing, every belief about money, love, safety, and human possibility that was operating in the household they grew up in. These absorbed messages become the blueprint. Not a metaphor for a blueprint, an actual functional blueprint, a set of encoded instructions that the nervous system uses for the rest of the person's life as the primary reference for what is real and what is possible. Researcher John Bowlby, whose work on attachment theory transformed developmental psychology, demonstrated that the quality of the earliest bonds a child forms with their primary caregivers creates what he called an internal working model, a set of expectations about whether the world is safe, whether other people can be trusted, and whether the self is fundamentally worthy of love and belonging. These expectations, once formed, do not remain in the past. They become the lens through which every future experience is interpreted. They become the filter that determines which information from the environment is noticed and which is screened out. They become the gravitational force that pulls the person again and again toward relationships and circumstances that confirm the original model, even when those relationships and circumstances are harmful. Here is what this looks like in practice. The child who received love that was inconsistent, warm and attentive one day, withdrawn or absent the next, without any pattern the child could understand or predict, does not grow up thinking consciously, "I believe love is unreliable and will ultimately be withdrawn." That would be too direct, too available to the rational mind. Instead, they grow up with an anxious relationship to closeness itself. They fall in love and then, without knowing why, begin testing the relationship, creating friction, looking for evidence of rejection, unconsciously manufacturing the instability that their internal model recognizes as the familiar shape of love. The child who grew up in an environment of financial stress and scarcity does not necessarily grow up consciously believing they are destined to be poor. They grow up with a nervous system that has been calibrated to the frequency of scarcity, that knows the sounds, the sensations, the emotional atmosphere of financial struggle with a kind of intimate body-level familiarity. And when abundance arrives, the nervous system does not celebrate. It becomes alert. It experiences the unfamiliar as threatening. It begins, quietly and automatically, to find ways back to the familiar territory of not quite enough. The child who was told, explicitly or through the behavior of those around them, that ambition is dangerous, that standing out invites attack, that success leads to isolation, that wanting more than what you have is evidence of ingratitude or arrogance, grows into the adult who approaches the threshold of genuine achievement and feels, with total convincing reality, a force pulling them back. Not fear, exactly. Something older than fear, something that knows, in the language of the body rather than the language of thought, that crossing that threshold is not safe. These blueprints are not destiny. That is the most important truth in this chapter, and it bears repeating with absolute clarity. The blueprint is not destiny. The nervous system is plastic. Neuroplasticity, the brain's documented capacity to rewire its own architecture in response to new experience, is one of the most significant discoveries in modern neuroscience. The circuits that were built in the first 7 years of life can be rebuilt. The set points that were calibrated by early experience can be recalibrated by deliberate and consistent new experience. But, and this is critical, they cannot be rebuilt by the conscious mind alone. They cannot be rebuilt by reading a better book or attending a more inspiring seminar or repeating more convincing affirmations. They can only be rebuilt at the level at which they were originally constructed, at the level of the body, at the level of sensation and emotion, at the level of repeated felt experience that is sufficiently different from the original template to begin, over time, to update the nervous system's model of what is normal, what is safe, and what is possible. You did not choose the blueprint, but you are the only one who can choose to redraw it. Understanding where the chain comes from does not break it, but it removes the most expensive part of its weight, the shame. The belief that the chain exists because of some fundamental defect in the person wearing it. You were not born with this chain. You were not born limited. You were born open, and then the world wrote on you before you had a pen. Now you do. Chapter 4. The Neuroscience of Staying Stuck. To break the chain, you must understand precisely what is happening in the brain when the chain activates. Not in general terms, in specific, mechanical, biological terms. Because the chain is not a spiritual condition, it is not a moral failure, it is a neurological event, and neurological events respond to neurological interventions. The brain operates on a principle of extraordinary efficiency. Contrary to the popular image of the brain as a vast, unused resource, the myth that humans use only 10% of its capacity, the brain is in fact running at near maximum efficiency at almost all times. And the way it achieves this efficiency is through a process called automatization. Every thought you have, every behavior you perform, every emotional response you generate, the first time these occur, they require significant neural resources. The brain must consciously process the decision, evaluate the options, generate the response. This is effortful. It is slow. It consumes enormous amounts of the brain's energy budget. But the second time the same pattern occurs, the brain does something remarkable. It begins to build a shortcut, a neural pathway that connects the trigger to the response with less processing required. Each repetition strengthens this pathway through a mechanism called myelination, in which the neural connections are wrapped in a fatty sheath that dramatically increases the speed of signal transmission. By the time a pattern has been repeated hundreds or thousands of times, which, if it began in early childhood, it most certainly has, the neural pathway connecting trigger to response is not a pathway at all. It is a highway, 12 lanes wide, running at maximum speed. And the response happens not in the measured, effortful time frame of conscious decision. It happens in milliseconds before the conscious mind even registers that a relevant trigger has been encountered. This is why you cannot simply decide to stop self-sabotaging. The self-sabotage is not running in the part of the brain where your decisions live. It is running in the part that operates below decisions, below intention, below awareness. It is running in the automatic, high-speed highway system that your brain has spent years, decades, in many cases, engineering to perfection. Research by neuroscientist Roy Baumeister and his colleagues has demonstrated what they call the negativity bias, the brain's documented tendency to assign significantly greater weight and priority to negative stimuli, negative memories, and threat-related information than to positive equivalents. This is not pessimism, it is evolutionary design. In an environment of genuine physical threat, the brain that was slower to respond to danger than to opportunity was the brain that got its owner killed. The problem is that this ancient threat detection system does not distinguish between a predator on the savannah and the emotional vulnerability required to pursue a dream. Both register as threat, both trigger the same cascade of cortisol and adrenaline, both activate the same ancient circuitry whose one available response is pull back, return to safety, retreat to the familiar. The prefrontal cortex, the most recently evolved region of the brain, responsible for rational decision-making, long-term planning, and the ability to override instinctive responses, is fully capable of evaluating this threat signal and overriding it. But it can only do this when it is operating without interference from the stress chemistry that the threat signal itself releases. Under conditions of moderate stress, the prefrontal cortex remains functional. Under conditions of significant threat activation, particularly when the trigger connects to deeply embedded early memories, the prefrontal cortex is flooded with cortisol that impairs its function. The ancient system takes over, and the ancient system does not have a goal-setting function. It does not have a vision board. It does not know about the promotion you have been working toward, or the relationship you have been building, or the dream you have been nurturing for years. It only knows, this feels like the thing that hurt before. And the response to the thing that hurt before is always the same. Stop, retreat, contract, survive. Here is the piece of neuroscience that changes everything, however. The brain does not distinguish between real experience and vividly imagined experience in terms of the neural pathways it builds. Every time you vividly imagine a scenario with sufficient emotional engagement, with physical sensation, with the full activation of the body's response system, you are building the same neural architecture that actual experience builds. The myelin wraps around the pathway. The highway strengthens. The automatic response begins to shift. This is the mechanism through which the chain can be broken. Not through insight alone, not through understanding the history of the wound, but through the repeated, deliberate, emotionally engaged generation of new neural experience that builds a competing highway, that installs a competing automatic response, that calibrates the nervous system to a new and expanded set point. The old chain does not disappear, but it loses its monopoly on the automatic response. A new pathway, wider, faster, more recently reinforced, begins to intercept the trigger first, and in that interception, choice becomes possible, where before there was only reflex. Chapter 5. The Upper Limit. Your built-in success ceiling. In 2009, psychologist Gay Hendricks published a concept that had been forming in his clinical work for decades. He called it the upper limit problem, and it describes, with striking precision, one of the most consistent and devastating patterns in the behavior of human beings who are capable of far more than they are currently living. The upper limit problem is this: every person has an internal thermostat setting for how much positivity, how much success, love, joy, abundance, creative expression, and aliveness they will allow themselves to experience before the subconscious triggers a correction. When circumstances push a person's life above that internal setting, when a relationship becomes genuinely wonderful, when a career breakthrough materializes, when a period of sustained joy and expansion begins, the system registers the reading as dangerously high, above the calibrated normal, outside the safe range, and then the correction occurs. A fight starts in the relationship for reasons that seem legitimate but that arrive with suspicious timing. A mistake is made in the career at precisely the wrong moment. An illness materializes, a depression settles in, a pattern of self-destructive behavior returns after months of absence. The temperature drops back to its set point. Most people never identify this pattern because the corrections always have plausible explanations. The relationship problem was real. The mistake was genuine. The illness was physical. But the timing, the extraordinary consistency of the timing, is the signature of the upper limit activation. The most insidious version of this pattern is what Hendricks calls worry as an upper limit behavior. When life is going well, when circumstances are genuinely good, some people find that a quiet anxiety begins to rise, a low-level, contentless dread, a sense that something must be about to go wrong, that this is too good and therefore will not last, that happiness of this intensity must be followed by something to balance it. This worry is not based on evidence. It is not the product of a rational assessment of genuine threats. It is the subconscious generating a low-frequency anxiety signal to bring the emotional temperature back down to the set point. The upper limit is not a ceiling on the world. It is a ceiling inside you. And ceilings can be raised. There is also the pattern of using past wounds as an upper limit trigger, a mechanism where, at the moment of significant positive expansion, the mind reaches back and retrieves memories of old pain, old failure, old humiliation, not because these memories are relevant to the current moment, but because they reliably produce the contraction the subconscious is seeking. You will recognize this pattern in yourself if you have ever noticed that your lowest moods seem to arrive not during genuinely difficult periods, but in the aftermath of your best ones. Understanding the upper limit is not enough to break it, but naming it creates something that didn't exist before. The moment of recognition, the moment when, in the middle of the sabotage, in the middle of the inexplicable argument, the irrational worry, the sudden impulse to destroy what you have built, you pause and you ask a different question. Not, what is wrong with me? But, am I upper limiting right now? That question, asked sincerely, in the moment of the pattern, is the beginning of the break, because the chain, once seen in real time, loses a fraction of its grip. Not all of it, not immediately, but enough. Enough to pause, enough to choose differently, enough to practice, over time, the act of staying above the set point long enough for the nervous system to begin recalibrating what normal feels like. Chapter 6. 6 Faces of the Invisible Chain. The chain does not have one appearance. It has many. It adapts to the individual, taking the form most likely to succeed in each specific nervous system, most likely to go undetected in each particular life. Here are the 6 most common faces of the invisible chain. The 6 patterns through which self-sabotage most frequently operates. The first face is procrastination of significance. This is not ordinary procrastination, the avoidance of tasks that are boring or unpleasant. This is a specific pattern in which the tasks that are most consistently avoided are the ones that matter most, the ones that would move the needle. The creative project that has been waiting for years, the conversation that would change the relationship, the business that exists in full detail inside the mind but never makes it onto the page. The person who carries this pattern is often extraordinarily productive in everything except the one thing that matters. They mistake activity for progress, busyness for movement, and the thing that would actually change their life waits in perpetual tomorrow. The second face is relationship ceiling. This is the pattern of consistently choosing partners who confirm the internal model of what love feels like, which, for many people, means partners who are emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or incapable of providing the depth of connection the person actually needs. When a genuinely available, consistent, deeply loving partner does appear, the nervous system does not feel relief. It feels unease. This does not feel like love, it says. Love feels like longing, like uncertainty, like the beautiful ache of wanting something you cannot fully have. The available partner is unconsciously rejected, through indifference, through manufactured distance, through the quiet withholding of full engagement, and the familiar pattern of reaching for what cannot fully be held continues. The third face is success vertigo. This is the pattern that activates at the threshold of significant achievement. The business reaches a new level, the career makes a quantum leap, the creative work begins to receive genuine recognition, and the person experiences, in response to this, not joy, or not joy alone, but a disorienting dizziness, a sense of fraudulence, an anxiety that rises in exact proportion to the external success, an almost irresistible impulse to explain away the achievement, to deflect the recognition, to ensure that no one, including the self, believes that this level of success is real, deserved, or sustainable. This is not humility. This is the upper limit activating through the specific mechanism of self-disqualification. The fourth face is the comfort zone gravity. This is the pull, felt physically, in the body, as genuine resistance that activates whenever action would push the person outside the familiar radius of their current existence. The gym visit that keeps not happening, the networking event that is always almost attended, the conversation with the person who could change everything that keeps being delayed for one more week, the plane ticket that never gets booked. Each individual instance has a legitimate explanation. Together they form a pattern, and the pattern is the chain maintaining the perimeter of the familiar through the accumulated weight of 1,000 individually reasonable decisions not to move. The fifth face is self-medication. This is the use of substances, behaviors, or relationships as a mechanism for managing the discomfort generated by the upper limit activation, by the anxiety, the dread, the guilt, the shame that the subconscious generates to drive the person back to the set point. The drinking that intensifies precisely when life is going well. The compulsive scrolling that accelerates at the moment of potential creative output. The eating that is not hunger. the romantic drama that is not love. These behaviors are not weaknesses of character. They are attempts, imprecise, ultimately self-defeating, but genuine, to regulate a nervous system that is generating more internal noise than the person has the tools to process. The sixth face is chronic smallness. This is the most pervasive and least dramatic face of the chain, the pattern of consistently making choices that keep the person smaller than they are, the opinion not voiced, the ambition not claimed, the talent not publicly expressed, the desire never stated. The person who carries this pattern has learned, somewhere in the earliest architecture of their experience, that visibility is dangerous, that claiming space invites attack, that being seen fully for what they are, for what they want, for what they are capable of, will produce a consequence more painful than the quiet suffering of self-imposed smallness. And so they make themselves manageable, approachable, non-threatening. They shrink to the size their environment taught them was safe, and they call it modesty, when what it actually is the oldest, most invisible face of the chain. You are not too much for this world. You were made too big for a room that was too small, and you have been folding yourself ever since. Chapter 7. The Rewire Protocol. Everything in this audiobook has been building to this chapter. The understanding of the chain's origin, its architecture, its neurological mechanism, its many faces, all of it serves one purpose: to make the rewire possible. Because a chain you cannot see cannot be broken, and a chain you can see but do not understand cannot be broken permanently, but a chain you have located, named, understood at its biological root, and mapped in its current operation, that chain has lost its most powerful weapon, its invisibility. The Rewire Protocol has 3 stages. They must be applied in sequence, and they must be applied at the level of the body, not merely the mind. Stage 1. Interruption. The first stage is the development of real-time pattern recognition, the ability to identify, in the moment of its occurrence, when the chain is activating. This requires the cultivation of a specific quality of attention, not the outward attention that most people spend their entire lives directing, but inward attention. The ability to notice, while you are in the middle of an experience, what is happening in the body, the tightening in the chest, the sudden clouding of the mind, the inexplicable resistance, the manufactured urgency of every distraction, the arrival of a dark and deflating thought at precisely the moment of positive movement. The practice is simple. When you notice any of these signals arriving in the context of forward movement, opportunity, or genuine positive expansion, pause, physically pause, breathe, and ask, is this real information about a real threat, or is this my upper limit activating? This question does not resolve the activation, but it creates a gap between the trigger and the automatic response, and in that gap, the chain's automation is interrupted. Stage 2. Somatic discharge. The second stage addresses the body directly because the chain is stored in the body. The nervous system activation that maintains the chain is not a mental event. It is a physiological event. It lives in the tension of chronically contracted muscles, in the shallow breathing patterns of a system that has been on low-level alert for decades, in the hormonal environment of a body that has normalized stress chemistry as its baseline state. Talk therapy and intellectual insight can identify the pattern and name its source, but they cannot, alone, discharge the stored physiological activation that maintains it. For that, the body must be engaged directly. Sustained breath work, specifically the extended exhale 4 seconds in and 8 seconds out, activates the vagal brake, drops the heart rate, and shifts the autonomic nervous system from sympathetic activation toward parasympathetic regulation. This is not a relaxation technique. It is a direct intervention in the biological hardware of the chain, combined with sustained physical exertion, any activity intense enough to metabolize the stress chemistry that accumulates during activation. This creates a window of genuine physiological openness in which the next stage becomes possible. Stage 3. High-amplitude re-imprinting. The third stage is the most critical and the most often misapplied. In the window of physiological openness created by Stage 2, the nervous system is maximally receptive to new input. The old pathway is momentarily less dominant. The architecture of the chain has been temporarily disrupted. This window must not be filled with positive thought or verbal affirmation. Affirmations applied to a nervous system still running the old program are paint applied to a cracked foundation. They do not reach the level at which the program lives. What must fill this window is a full-body, emotionally activated, physically felt experience of the self beyond the chain. Not a vision of external success, a felt experience of internal identity. Who are you in the body, in the breath, in the quality of your own presence, when you are not held back? What does it feel like somatically to live without the upper limit, to stay above the set point and not flinch, to be seen and not shrink? Generate this experience with every biological resource available during the window of openness. Hold it for as long as possible. Feel it not as fantasy, but as immediate present reality. Each repetition of this process lays new neural infrastructure. Each time the old trigger fires and the new response is generated instead, the competing pathway strengthens, the myelin builds, the automatic response, slowly, over weeks and months of deliberate practice, begins to shift. The chain does not disappear overnight, but it loosens, and then it loosens more. And then, in a moment you will not be able to precisely identify in retrospect, you find yourself on the other side of the threshold that has stopped you for years, not because you finally found enough willpower, but because you rebuilt the architecture, the first free step. You arrived at the beginning of this audiobook carrying a weight you may not have fully named, the particular flavor of frustration that comes not from external circumstances, but from the sense that something inside you has been working against you, that you have been the obstacle in your own path, that the most persistent resistance in your life has not come from the world, but from yourself. You now understand what that weight is. It is not a character flaw. It is not weakness. It is not evidence of some fundamental inadequacy in your design. It is a chain, built from the earliest experiences of your life, maintained by the most powerful biological system in your body, invisible to the conscious mind that has been trying, with genuine effort and sincere desire, to move past it. You now know where the chain was forged. You understand the architecture of its maintenance, the subconscious thermostat, the upper limit, the automatic neural highway that runs the sabotage pattern below the level of conscious decision. You have seen the 6 phases through which it operates in your specific life, and you have the 3-stage protocol through which its infrastructure can be systematically dismantled and rebuilt. What you do next matters more than everything in this audiobook combined, because information without application produces nothing. Understanding without practice changes nothing. The most precise map of the chain is worthless if you fold it up and carry it without using it. The first step is not the complete rewire protocol. It is not a dramatic life transformation executed this week. The first step is one moment of real-time recognition. The next time you feel the pull, the next time the resistance arrives, the procrastination sets in, the inexplicable anxiety rises at the threshold of the good thing, pause, name it, say out loud or internally, with the same calm authority with which you would name anything else you understand. This is my chain. I see it. It is not me. It is a pattern, and I am choosing right now differently than the pattern requires. That moment, That single moment of conscious interruption is the first link broken, and the chain that loses its first link has already begun to fail. You are not the person the chain says you are. You never were. The chain was installed before you had a voice in the matter, before you had the understanding you have now, before you knew what it was or where it came from, or that it was ever possible to break it. You have that voice now. Use it. The chain is invisible, but it is not unbreakable. You are the proof. Begin.